Welcome, welcome everyone to the third quarter Milwaukee Tableau user group. It's great to have you with us today. Um, it's the top of the hour, so I'm sure lots of people are getting their Outlook or calendar reminders and joining the meeting. So we'll give them maybe a minute or so to actually hop on Bevy, and which is the platform that we use, and join us. I guess as people are joining us, make sure that you find the chat. It should be on the right-hand side, and there's actually two components to the chat. There's a general kind of chat where we can just kind of like talk back and forth. But then there's also a Q&A tab, and we're going to be using the Q&A throughout this meeting as well to serve up questions to Ken and Kevin. So make sure that you have both the general tab, you know where that is, and the Q&A tab. So do that. And then in the general tab, in that general Q&A, I see Bruce. Hey, Bruce. I see people have already found that chat. That's awesome. Tell us maybe where you're dialing in from, and yay or nay on the pumpkin spice latte. It is that season, so let me know. Like, I will tell everybody right here. I've never had one, so no. Sorry, my team just heard me admit that, and they're shaming me now. So that's really great. That's fun. Um,
I'm with you. I
so
think it's disgusting.
well, I've never even had it, but good to know I've got support there. So thanks.
To be
Yeah.
totally fair, though, Kevin thinks all coffee is disgusting. So
Any hint of coffee
Oh,
is
okay.
completely vile.
I mean,
it's
that's
the
rough. I
coffee
don't know.
part.
I don't know if you've seen my Twitter profile, but it literally says coffee snob. So I like coffee. I do not categorize pumpkin spice lattes as coffee. It's flavored milk. But anyway, but that's okay. To each their own.
See, I would probably
I'm
disagree because I can taste a hint of coffee in anything.
yeah.
My
Okay.
my wife and daughter like to get the coffee ice cream. They're like, oh, it just tastes like chocolate ice cream. No, it
No,
tastes
no, no, no.
exactly like coffee.
Do you
Okay.
like pumpkin
Yeah.
pie? Is it the pumpkin flavor or is it just the concept of putting it in coffee?
No, I actually think I like the flavors, but I also don't eat pumpkin pie.
That's weird.
Yeah. I'm sharing it all here today. So didn't realize that my admission there was going to turn into I don't know, me opening up and probably having to talk to my therapist about how I feel about pumpkin. But here we are. It's great to have such an active chat. It's great to have so many people joining us. Bruce is a tea snob. Wendy, no pumpkin drinks. Awesome. No flavored coffee for rye. So that's awesome. Oh, we've got Dustin joining. We got lots of awesome people joining us. If you are just joining us, make sure you have that chat up. Tell us whether you're yay or nay on pumpkin spice lattes. We know how Kevin feels. And also make sure that you know where the Q&A tab is. So the chat is different from the Q&A tab. Q&A we're going to use to actually ask Ken and Kevin questions today. And it just makes it a lot easier to keep track of all of those. So welcome everyone. We're really excited to have such an awesome agenda today, which, let's dive right into it. So our agenda, we're gonna first start with, if you've ever been to a Milwaukee Tug before, audience profile. So we're gonna ask you some questions about you to better understand kind of where you're at with Tableau and what your interests are. And then we have a very special presentation today, how to do cool stuff in Tableau with Ken and Kevin. And then if there's time, we can open it up for just kind of Tableau doctor type questions where the community can kind of answer any struggles that you might be having with Tableau. We may not have a lot of time for that, so we'll see. And then we'll talk about upcoming events and give away some prizes. So again, we tend to do this at every Milwaukee Tableau user group, but we're going to encourage you to ask questions using that Q&A panel throughout the meeting. And we're going to pick 4 people who are going to win prizes today. So make sure you ask those questions. All right. With that, let's dive right into the audience poll. So if you are, if you've joined us before, you kind of know how we like to do this. You can either type in this very beautiful case-sensitive URL or click the one that I dropped in the chat, or you can use your phone and scan the QR code. So bring up that, that polling, and we're going to, whoops, sorry. I'm gonna jump over here to do our polling questions. It's a really great URL. That's right, Justin. Yeah. So I'm going to give people just another second here to join. And we'll kick it off. Okay, here we go. So you should now be seeing the first question on your device. So we're going to start off with whether this is your first TUG. So TUG is Tableau User Group. Got lots of longtime members. That's great. Few new people. Awesome. Cool. Next question. Do you work remotely in the office or hybrid? Let's see what the mix is. Oh, this is excellent. So a lot of like neck and neck here. One person's in the office. Yeah. Who's that? Awesome. Okay. So if you're hybrid, what days do you kind of prefer to go into the office? And you can select multiple options here. Really, a Friday? Someone came right out of the gate with Friday. Not Friday, Kevin. Yeah. Yeah, Wednesday. We're pretty close to a normal distribution, folks. All right. Yeah. Do you have like set days maybe? Like very specific days, like the entire team comes into the office, or I don't know. I can't really do Mondays or Fridays. Yeah, and Patty says Wednesday is the only remote day that they're allowed. So wow. All right. Maybe that's good though. I think a lot of people tend to go in on Wednesdays, so maybe the highways aren't as busy on Mondays and Fridays. Who knows? Okay. Next question. Where is your company on this kind of simplified data maturity curve? Sorry, I don't have a lot of commentary on this one. I did not put together the poll. It was put together by our wonderful Olga Rosales, who I don't think is here right now. I'm sure she had really great ideas for what I should say about this, but unfortunately I don't have anything. So it is cool to see the mix of experiences though, and how people are kind of leveraging data and analytics and you know, I find I guess just from personal experience, I think overall as an enterprise you could be at, you know, you kind of fall into one of these buckets, but then you know, getting a little bit more granular when you start to look, you know, by team or by department, even those groups can kind of, you have some teams that are like, you know, super optimized and other teams that are a little bit more reactive still. So everybody's on their own journey. Okay, next question is if you create, do you create Tableau dashboards that are customer facing or are they all internal? Yeah. Most people are saying all internal. That tends to be what we do as well. But would love to hear maybe from the people where their Tableau dashboards are their products. I mean, it would be cool to like just understand how you've like architected that and implemented that. So pretty cool. Awesome. Thank you all for your responses there. And this is our final question. What topics are you most interested in hearing about from us? Um, as you know, we like to kind of plan in advance when we can. And we are starting to think about 2024 already. So would love to know what you want to hear about. Very cool. Awesome. These are really, really great. Well, and of course, taking your dashboard to the next level. I mean, we kind of set you up for that here today. So, but this is awesome. This gives us a lot of information as we think about next year. So thank you all for participating. All right. We're going to jump back to our slide deck here and introduce the next segment of our meeting today, which is this awesome presentation. I don't know if you've seen it before. I've seen it before, and I learned something every time because the Ken and Kevin fit a lot into this presentation that I feel like the best note taker in the world can't capture everything. So I would like to watch it multiple times, but really excited to have them present how to do cool stuff in Tableau here today. If you don't know Kevin and Ken, you might just be living under a rock because they are all over, Tableau Public, Twitter, LinkedIn, everywhere. Tableau's website. They are just really, really impressive individuals, and we're really excited to have them here today. I could list their many accomplishments. You know what? I just might. So, Ken is a Tableau evangelist and data engineering consultant at Moxie Analytics. He's an active member of the Tableau community, a forums ambassador, and a member of the Tableau Visionary Hall of Fame. Kevin is a Tableau evangelist as well, data visualization consultant at Moxie Analytics. He's a 4-time Tableau visionary and a Tableau public ambassador, and also very active in the Tableau community. And if you don't know about their blog, flerlagetwins.com, you should really, really check it out. I've used their Sankey diagram and like spider graph, like blog posts, and they actually provide Tableau workbooks quite a bit that you can use, and they're super dynamic, so you can customize them for your purposes. So highly recommend checking out their blog if you haven't already. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin and Ken.
Thank you, Brandy. Share my screen. And hopefully you can see PowerPoint where it says Tableau Conference.
We can, yes.
All right. So this is the presentation that we did at Tableau Conference. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And you're going to see the same exact slide deck. So that's why. We're going to be talking about how to do cool stuff in Tableau. This is the 2023 version. We did it in 2022 as well at the Tableau Conference. And you're probably going to see it in 2024 and 2025. Just different tips and different tricks and different techniques throughout. Just as a way of introductions, that's me on the left when I was clinging onto a little bit of hair. And then that is my identical twin brother, Ken, on the right. We look a little more identical now that we're both shaved heads. We run the website, flerlagetwins.com, as Brandy mentioned. And I'm a 4-time Tableau visionary. Ken is a Hall of Fame Tableau visionary. I think there's only 16 Hall of Fame Tableau visionaries in the world. So Ken on that. We did present this as I mentioned at Tableau conference. We did it twice, and in the second session, people came out in droves. There was I don't know. We felt pretty pretty blessed that there was a line throughout the conference hall, and they actually opened up a bunch of the stages. So it was supposed to hold 400. We ended up putting 1,150 people in that space. So it was very cool, flattering, and I actually got a little bit emotional when we were thanking people when we started that off. So anyways, that's a little selfie from that presentation. We're super excited. Back in April, Ken and I decided, hey, let's work together. And we joined a company called Moxie Analytics. Moxie Analytics is run by Laura Madsen and Serena Roberts. Laura is author of several books. And you may recognize Serena. She runs the Twin Cities Tug and is a 5-time. I believe that should now be a 6-time Tableau user group ambassador. We always like to start off our presentations, especially Tableau conference presentations, with something silly. In 2022, we did the Ultimate Favorites competition. At that point, I was the second most favorited author on Tableau Public, and Kim was the third. Pradeep Kumar, if you know his work, if you don't, you should go on Tableau Public, search for Pradeep Kumar G. He knocked us down a notch. I'm now third and Ken's fourth. But I'm still higher than Ken. But this year, we're going to do the same thing. We'll start off with something a little silly. And this is a story about the Tableau conference in 2022. It involves me, Ken, and Serena, who now runs Moxie Analytics. So we were at the conference in Vegas in 2022, and we were at a Tableau event where we were drinking some beers and having some fun. And the event was over, and we could see the Mandalay Bay where we were staying. And so we decided to walk. But unfortunately, what looks like 3 blocks in Vegas is actually about 3 miles. So for about 2 hours, we were walking and we were talking. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, of course, in super slow motion, I have to move my little thing, Serena takes a step and bites it. She slipped on something. So you're probably curious, like, what did she slip on? Right? So we'll do a little multiple choice. You can tell me what you think. Was it the stereotypical banana peel, tennis balls? Was it a slab of butter? Or was it a ham sandwich? And I'll give you about 10 seconds to put it in the chat if you want. Your guesses. Ken, you can tell us if people get it right. It was a ham sandwich, a very greasy ham sandwich. And she, and this is 100% true, was just sprawled out on the ground. She completely wiped out. It wasn't just like she tripped over her 2 feet. She completely wiped out. So as she's lying upon the rubble of thinly sliced ham and extra mayo, she has a vision. And I admit this is where the story gets a bit embellished. She has a vision, and that vision is Moxie Analytics plus Flerlage twins equals world domination, or just a pretty sweet idea. So that's how Ken and I joined Moxie Analytics, as Serena always says, a small but mighty team of 6, where our primary goal is to enable people to solve problems with data. And of course, our secondary goal is world domination. We do a bunch of stuff, you know, what most consultants do. We do data project work. We build Tableau dashboards. We love to do that. We also have a fractional data hero program where you can basically get us on your staff for X number of hours a week, up, 10 to 40 hours in a month for at least a couple months. Tableau Lifeline, if you have a sticky problem, you can get with us for an hour. And then we also do Tableau training. We have one coming up in October. All right. So let's get to it. We're going to talk about how to do cool stuff in Tableau. It's going to be a mix of stuff. It's going to be tips. It's going to be tricks. It's going to be some techniques that take a little time to build out. And as Brandy was talking about, we'll go fast. And taking notes might be hard. So I'm assuming Brandy's recording this, but if not, or even if so, you can get this session from Tableau Conference on Salesforce Plus. All you have to do is register on Salesforce Plus, and you can watch that on demand. And then all the content that we're going to talk about today is on flerlagetrends.com/coolstuff2023. It's just a list of a bunch of blog posts. A bunch of them are ours, and then some of them are others as well. And speaking of others, all this content is inspired and sometimes pulled from other people. And there's very specific people that this content was pulled from or inspired by. So we just wanted to thank these specific folks, and of course, everybody else in the Tableau community that's really been impactful to our journey and our learning. All right, with that, let's get to it. I'm going to jump over to Tableau, and I'm going to start off the section, then we'll send it over to Ken, and I'll finish this up. We're going to talk about how to do some cool stuff with design. When I speak about design, sometimes I'm talking about aesthetics, but most of the time I'm talking about making a chart more legible, easier to read, easier to understand. But there are some points where we just want to try and make things look nicer as well, because if a chart looks nice, somebody's going to spend a lot more time looking at it than if it's steaming garbage. I don't know why I said that, but whatever. All right, let's talk about dual axis charts. So, excuse me, let's talk about scatter plots. This is just a scatter plot looking at birth rate versus life expectancy for a trimmed down list of countries. And what you might notice here is that there's this little orange mark on top of this red. It's a little hard to see, but what I guarantee you didn't notice is that there's a little blue mark on top of that big blue mark. And the problem with this is anytime we have any possibility of marks overlapping, a scatter plot, dot plot, jitter plots, you need to make sure there's some transparency in those marks so you can see the overlapping marks. So what we might do really simply is just bring that opacity down, and this is okay. At least you can see it, but it's still kind of hard to see those marks even with the opacity down. So one of the things I like to do is change this to a dual axis chart. And I'm going to do that by hitting the control key and dragging this next to it. I'm going to do that a bunch today. And then let's just dual axis this and synchronize the axes. I'm going to do that a lot. We'll probably won't talk about that. And then what I'm going to do is just the second one, I'm going to bring the opacity all the way back up, and I'm going to change it to a shape. And then I'm going to make sure I select that outer shape. And that's it. And we have, when we're done, we have this really nice, chart with opacity, but with an outline so that we can really see those marks easily. Again, here's the original where we couldn't see those overlapping marks. And here's the final one. Again, looks beautiful, but really is easy to read, easy to see those overlapping marks. In this one, we're looking at the sum of sales by category and subcategory, and it's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, I guess. But one thing that kind of bothers me is the fact that these things just, the furniture kind of flows right into office supplies. There's no separation between furniture, office supplies, and technology. That bothers me a little bit. So one option we might have is maybe I'm going to hit the control key again. I'm going to do this a bunch throughout this presentation. Maybe we take that category and we drop it on color. So now we've kind of had this separation using color. But I never like to introduce color, categorical color, if I don't need to. And in this case, I think that's one of those cases. We don't really need color because we've got all the labeling. So let's pull that off. And we'll show you an old trick, but one I love is we'll go up to analysis and totals, and we're going to add subtotals. What you're going to see is that added a total line for each of these, a subtotal for each of these. I'm going to click on this bar, and I'm just going to pick this little drop down. I'm just going to click hide. And then I'm going to right click on this total, hit format, and we're going to come over this total label and just delete it. Now we have separation between the bars. We'll show you the before and after. Again, here they ran into each other. And here we've got this separation using a subtotal between the different categories. Love this technique. Use it all the time. I learned this about 5 or 6 years ago from Jeff Schaefer, who I learned a lot of my tips from. So very cool technique. I live in the Burlington, Kentucky, which is where the Cincinnati airport is. Actually, I'm about 15 minutes from Cincinnati, Ohio. Have been here basically my whole life. So was Ken until he moved away for a girl who he's still married to. But we grew up here in the Cincinnati area, and we're both huge Bengals fans, even though the Bengals got destroyed on Sunday. But we're huge Bengals fans. This chart is showing the win percentage by all the AFC teams in last year. So I think you can quickly see that the Bengals were third. It looks like the Chiefs and then the Bills and the Bengals, and we could sort that, by the win percentage if we wanted. But I think it's pretty obvious. The Bengals had a really good win percentage, much higher than most of the teams. But I think what we've done here is given the users a really easy way to compare win percentages against all the other teams, but we aren't showing the win percentage against what could have been. And in this case, what could have been is 100%. So we want to create a chart that not only allows you to compare, but also allows you to compare against what win percentage it could have been. So I'm going to cheat and I'm going to show you what we want to build, and then we'll build it. So this is the original. This is the after. This is showing the same information this is, and the comparisons are just as easy, but it's giving you this context of we're at 75% to this 100% possibility. Now we see some context of how close people were to winning all their games. Just a little bit of extra context that adds so much. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before, control and drag this percentage out. And then as soon as I do it, because I do this with every presentation, I realize that's not what I want to do. I'm just going to double click in here and I'm going to type min of 1.0. That min of 1.0 is 100%. And we're going to get these lines that stretch out to 1. By the way, I like to use 1.0 because it makes a decimal versus an integer, and you have more flexibility here. I'm going to take this Bengals color off. I'm going to size it way down, maybe change this color to a light gray. Then we will dual axis this and synchronize as we pretty much always do. Now that line's on top, so I just want to switch the order. Now this is looking pretty good. Let's hide this. The one thing that I don't like is that line is a little bit thicker than I want it to be, this min of 1. So the problem is it's as small, as thin as it possibly can be. So a little trick, I like to go to the border here, and I like to add a white border. So watch this gray line. It's a little bit thick. We add a white border. It just makes it even thinner. So now, again, we have the ability to compare against the other teams, but we also have the ability to compare against what could have been that 100% mark. I'm not a huge fan of stacked bar charts. I'm going to talk a little bit about them later. I think they can be hard to use, but when there's two kind of slices, kind of like a pie chart, I think they're okay. In this case, I'm looking at the count of orders by category and subcategory, and I am showing in red, or that pink color, the number of returned orders. So we can see for furnishings, there was 852 orders that weren't returned and 67 that were. Here, 108 that were returned and 1231 that weren't. But the problem we have here is, well, like copiers, there's 65 that weren't returned, but I think there's a little sliver of red there. I'm going to try and get my cursor. There we go. Trying to get my cursor on that little red is almost impossible. Would you want your user to have to do that? I certainly wouldn't. And this is a value of 5. Imagine if that value is 1. They might not even see it. So one of the things I like to do is allow my users to see the returns and the non-return values, no matter where they hover on this stacked bar. So we're going to do that. And we're going to do that with a Vision tooltip. So I'm going to start by duplicating this sheet. And I'm just going to put some @ symbols in there just so it goes to the top. I wouldn't do that normally, but so what we want to do is I'm going to take this again, hold the control key. I'm going to put this was returned up on rows so that it's showing a different bar for each. It's not stacked anymore. Let's throw a label on here, and I'm going to just hide the headers for category and subcategory. Now what I want to do is use this as a Vision tooltip. So let's go into the tooltip. I'm going to insert sheets, and I'm going to pick those @ symbols. If we were to filter on all fields, you'll see what happens. It's just showing the yeses and just showing the nos, right? That's not helpful at all. So what we really want to do is kind of back that up. We don't want it filtering on everything. We want it just filtering on subcategories. So we can do that in our Vision tooltip. Just here's a little filter, and we can just insert subcategory into that. And now let's show the final result. Again, this is the original where it's almost impossible to get my cursor over onto that 5. Or in this case, we can just hover over any part of the bar and it'll show the 65 orders that weren't returned and the 5 that were. Anywhere we hover, it's going to show both of those. And you can certainly hover over back and forth, but much easier for your end users. All right, this chart is showing energy usage by region. And I don't know, maybe there's really nothing wrong with this chart. Maybe it's a little bit bold and red and in your face. And maybe that's what we want because we're talking about energy usage and probably too much energy usage across the world. But I want to kind of back off that boldness and that in your face. And this is a technique that that someone referred to as a punctuated bar chart. Love the name and love the technique. So same thing I've done a bunch of times is duplicate this pill. I'm going to go ahead and dual axis these and synchronize. And I'm going to take the label off of this one for now, since it was on both. And then I'm going to change this one. Instead of using a bar, I'm going to use a Gantt bar. And I just think I want to make this label a little bit bold. And then I'm going to go to the bar itself, and I'm just going to back down the opacity. And now we have this really beautiful, like I said, punctuated bar chart. Just a nice design, looks great. I think aesthetics is really important in this one, and also kind of brings down that boldness. So I use this technique all the time. I know Ken does. Really beautiful chart. If you've ever seen any of our presentations in the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, you've probably heard me yap on and on about a transparent shape. What's a transparent shape? Transparent shape is if you went into, say, PowerPoint and drew out a square, and then you went up to the top and you removed the fill color, and then you removed the outline as well, your shape disappears. But the shape is actually there. It's just transparent. You can actually save that as an image, and then you can bring it into Tableau in your shapes repository, and you can use it for lots of different use cases. And I encourage you to check out our website, search for transparent shapes, and see all those different ones. But my favorite one is on big numbers, big text marks. You may at the top of your dashboard just kind of have these numbers that tell people where they're at to sort of level set. We often call those bands. And then ultimately your users are interacting with it and they click on it and they get the big blue square of death. I have had many users come to me and say, hey, I think I broke your dashboard. Well, it's just weird. And you can't control that color, and I want to get rid of it. So you can do that. You can do that with a transparent shape. I'm going to change this to a shape, change it, go to more shapes. I use transparent shapes so much, I put a little symbol at the top so they come to the top, and you can't see them, but they're there. I'm just going to apply a transparent shape. So now when I click on the mark, you don't get the blue square of death any longer. So I do that with every big number, every text mark that I ever use, so that people don't have that weird experience. Okay, I got something a little bit similar to that. Let me talk first about this dashboard. I did a very informal poll on Twitter. I was just curious, what's people's standard dashboard size that they use? I tend to default to 14 by 800 just because I'm always paranoid on, what people's screens are. But I just did a little poll of 50 people, and surprisingly 1600 by 900 was the most popular. So I just created this little Tableau public dashboard to show this. The left-hand side shows you kind of an image of what that might look like compared to full screen 16 by 9. And then the right-hand side just shows a bar chart showing how many people answered that. So 8 people said 1600 by 900 out of 50, and then 3 people out of 50 said 1300 by 800, right? So this is being done with just a highlight action. Let's hover over this, highlight the bar. But if you're like me, something's driving you nuts. And like I called the other thing the big blue square of death, I call this the sticky note of death. This looks like a yellow sticky note to me, and it drives me nuts because there's no yellow in my dashboard. It just is really off-putting. So we can get rid of that yellow, and I'll show you how. we are doing the highlight action on the size field. That's just this dimension here. So what we can do is we can duplicate the size field just by right clicking and choosing duplicate. I've already done that. And then what I'm going to do is just drag that up in front of rows. It's the same exact thing. Looks like my font color is a little different. It's the same exact thing, but it's size copy. And then I'm going to right click and unhide this header. So now when I go back to the dashboard, I'm highlighting on size, but the field I'm showing is size copy. So now when I highlight, we don't get the yellow sticky note of death any longer. All right, that's it for my first section. I'm going to pass it over to Ken. Ken is going to show us some other cool stuff, and we'll come back to me later.
All right. Get my sharing here. See Tableau okay?
We can.
Is that
Yeah. Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. So we're going to totally switch gears here and do some cool stuff with maps. So we're going to start by talking about the flat Earth. The Earth is a globe, right? And as soon as we start to try to flatten that globe onto a two-dimensional surface, we end up with some level of distortion. You can see Greenland looks like it's about the size of Africa on this map, but in truth, it's the size of the Democratic Republic of Congo, just a smallish country in Africa. And that's because of this distortion from these maps. So what's happening here is that this map is using the Mercator projection. Mercator projection was created some 500 years ago to help sailors, more or less, sail in a straight line. But it has all these flaws, right? And primarily the flaw of it is that each of these each of these sections here is about 1,000 miles, right? But you can see as we get closer to the North Pole, and it does the same thing. I've cut off the South Pole here, but it does the same thing towards the South Pole. We have this sort of stretching, this distortion. And that's what causes Greenland, that is close to the North Pole, to look so much bigger than it actually is. So let's jump over here. So here, Greenland and Democratic Republic of Congo, as I said, are more or less the same size. And I'm showing this in Tableau. Tableau's default map projection is a Mercator projection, right? So we can see that sort of big flaw. So the first thing I want to show is the ability to actually see the scale error in the scale. This is something I didn't know existed before until Kevin showed me. So if we sort of just zoom in on the Democratic Republic of Congo and we turn on our map scale here, you can see the map scale down here. It's about 1,000 miles. If we hover over that, we'll get we'll see the map scale accuracy there. So plus or minus 100 miles. And so let's just zoom in on both of those. And then let's see what this scale error is for both of these when we zoom in on those. And you can see the map scale error for Greenland is minus 800 miles versus DRC is plus or minus 100 miles. So this is just a great little tool to see the accuracy of the scale. So if you're at any point on your map, you can look at that scale and be like, okay, my scale is wrong. My scale is off quite a bit, or it's not off quite a bit. It's just a helpful tool to understand the scale as you're looking at some default maps in Tableau. Of course, if your goal is to show the scale, an accurate scale, we can actually use an entirely different map projection. So here's something called the hammer projection. It's an equal area projection. You can see Greenland is much smaller here. It's because it's sizing these to be the correct areas, right? So let's build this in Tableau. So to build this, I've downloaded a hammer projection in a GeoJSON file format from a place on the internet. We're going to select my spatial file. Here's my GeoJSON hammer projection. We will grab this geography field here and drag this out to detail. We get our generated Latin longs. You can see that it's mapping it over top of the sort of the Mercator projection. It's sort of tricking these coordinates to plot on a Mercator projection. So we just want to turn that off. Let's go to our map layers. We could uncheck all these boxes, but we can also, a quick trick is just push that washout up to 100% and they'll disappear. So now if we look at Greenland and Democratic Republic of Congo, you can see Greenland is much smaller and more or less from a scale standpoint is about the same size as Democratic Republic of Congo. As I said, when we take that globe and we smash it down to a two-dimensional surface, we're going to get some level of distortion. So the distortion we end up with here is that the further we get towards the poles, we get sort of misshapen objects, right? Greenland isn't really shaped that way. So it's kind of getting kind of wonky as we get to the north. But the thing I think I want to leave you with here is that when you're thinking about maps and you're building maps, is think about which things are most important to you. Is scale the most important? Is distance? What are the most important aspects of your map? And then choose a map projection that best meets that need, right? So if you really, really care about the size of objects being accurate, then choose an equal area projection. If that's not as important, then maybe Mercator projection works better, right? Okay, but there's lots of other things we can do with these spatial files in Tableau. So how many people, I'm sure just about everybody has dealt with this at some point. If you're mapping United States data, you've probably dealt with this. I call it the Alaska problem, right? As soon as you map Alaska and Hawaii together, we end up with all this sort of wasted white space because Alaska is so far up to the northwest and Hawaii is so far to the southwest, right? So all this space is kind of wasted. So what do we typically do? How we typically approach that? Well, we'll create one sheet that just has the continental US. I should note that this is showing poverty rates by county, by the way. Then we should create another sheet for Alaska, another sheet for Hawaii, and then we create a dashboard and we bring them all together. Right? We've tiled the continental US and then we've floated Hawaii and Alaska over here on top of here. This works, but I just really don't love this technique for a couple of reasons. One is these things are floating, and if you want to kind of tighten up the space a little bit, you end up with this sort of rectangular box being over top of Southern California. I can't hover over them. So that's kind of annoying. But the bigger problem is as soon as we filter these sheets down to specific states, our color legend is actually changing, right? So this dark purple is only about 24%. For Hawaii, it's about 16%. And on the continental US, it's about 50%, right? So these color scales are totally out of sync. So we then have to apply some other little hacks to try to synchronize those color scales. And it's just sort of a painful process. It would be nice if there was an easier way to create this sort of combined map. And as you might guess, there is. So Sarah Battersby, who is a former Tableau employee, she took a Lambert map projection. So it's a slightly different map projection. And she basically edited that map projection, brought down Alaska and brought Hawaii over and created this single spatial file for mapping the entire US in a single sheet. So we're gonna build that here. I've already created my data source. Let's take a look at this. I've brought in an Excel spreadsheet with my poverty rates, and I have my spatial file. This Lambert County file has county level geography. I've done a join of these two. The spatial file has FIPS codes. So if you're not familiar with FIPS codes, it's just an integer value defining geographic locations in the US. So we've got a state and a county FIPS code that we're joining on of these two data sets. So we will, just like we did last time, I don't know why this data guide wants to pop up when I do that. We'll drag geometry over and you can see we get our spatial file. It's all one self-contained file, right? You can see when you hover, we're only getting one mark. So we want to drag state and county over to detail. Oh, I dropped it too early. Now we get a mark per county. We'll want to turn off the background layers again. Again, we can turn that washout up. We'll drag poverty rate onto color. I'm going to turn off the border. We'll edit the color here. I'm going to choose this Inferno color and let's just move this all the way up. And just within a couple of clicks, we've been able to solve all those Alaska problem issues, right? Much less white space. We don't have multiple sheets, and we have this really nice self-contained county map for the US. One of the blogs that's on the website Kevin referenced before has a link to a bunch of versions of this. There are county versions, there are state versions, and a variety of other sort of, there's some things even with like territories as well on that blog. All right, so one last thing we can do with spatial files is create hex maps. So I love hex maps because they sort of reduce the impact of geographic size, and you can kind of look at each state equally, right? So historically, the way you create hex maps is there was a Excel spreadsheet that had each state and then these sort of columns and rows, like X and Y coordinates, and then you plot those, and then you use this hexagon mark to plot those in position. That works okay, but it's a little bit of a hard thing to get things lined up and sized properly. So some inventive folks in our community decided, well, let's just create a spatial file with a hex map, right? So this is using a spatial file. Let me show you what this looks like, just like we did last time. So this is showing Superstore profit ratios. So we have our Superstore connection to Excel. We've got our spatial file. And in this case, we've just joined it on the state here, right? So we're able to pretty quickly, pretty easily create this by just dragging out our geometry field and dropping the profit ratio on the color, similar to what we did before. But one problem I have with hex maps is as soon as you start to filter things, these states start to disappear. So, you know, I'm only showing central and south here, and you kind of lose track of this even being the US, right? Because you don't see the shape of that US, and you just kind of forget which states are there. So it'd be nice to have sort of a background layer to where even if you filter out those, you still have that sort of background map showing you the basic structure of the US. If you went to our TC22 presentation, you'll know that we solved this problem using set control and sets, but there's a much easier approach using maps and spatial files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an entirely new, I've already done this, but I've created an entirely new data source. This is just the spatial file. We're not joining it to, we want to keep it sort of disconnected from the Superstore data. And we're going to take the geometry from there and drag this out and create a new map layer, right? So we've done that. Let's drop this opacity all the way down. We're going to put state abbreviation on label. And you'll notice that now when I filter out, we still get that sort of background map. We can see which states are out there that have been filtered out. And it's just a much better user experience than having these big gaps in your hex maps. Okay, so let's switch gears completely. We're going to talk about some cool stuff with synchronized scrolling. So you might be wondering what in the world I mean by synchronized scrolling. So what we want to do is build this dashboard here, right? And if you've worked with Tableau for some time, you're probably looking at this saying, okay, this is hard to build, right? But basically what we have is a row for each state or province. We've got three measures. We've got our total sales, and then a spark line for the total sales with highlighting the min and max values. And then we have the same thing for profit. And then we have the same thing for profit ratios. This is very hard to do because you can't sort of insert in Tableau, you can't naturally insert these sort of text columns in between these charts, right? But what we're going to do is try to build this. We're going to try a couple of techniques, see what kind of problems we run into, see if we can solve them, and just sort of work through a number of different techniques as we go. So starting off, I would try to build this with a single sheet here. And so I've already done this. I've dragged month to the columns shelf and measure values to rows, and we've got our sales, profit, and profit ratios here. And so you can see we get sort of that spark line here. This works okay until we realize that this profit ratio looks pretty much flat, and profit is pretty flat as well. And the problem is that these are using a shared scale, and sales are large numbers, right? This is going more or less from 0 to 20,000, and it's plotting these other ones on that same scale, and it just sort of flattens the lines, and they're useless at this point. So what we'd like to be able to do is sort of normalize those and create their own sort of independent axes. And we can do that by creating some normalization calculated fields. So for example, I take profit here, and the basic formula for this normalization is shown here. Basically, what I'm trying to do is take the min value and make it 0, take the max value and make it 1 for all 3 of these measures. And that way I can plot them on a shared axis and still see the peaks and valleys. So this is the basic calculated field for those min and max values. And with that, you can see we do sort of solve that particular problem. So we're one step along the path of building this in a single sheet. But the next thing we want to be able to do is add these totals, right? So I've been able to add the total sales right in front of sales by using a discrete pill with total sales. But I can't insert, to do profit and profit ratio, I can't really insert discrete pills after these marks, right? It's just not possible with Tableau. So I'm kind of stuck with this one, right? One thing I could try is this hack. This is a brilliant hack. I call it a hack, but it's a brilliant technique by Sam Parsons that allows you to sort of scale your cells slightly different for different measures. So you kind of get these guys that are small, and these are wider, and these are smaller than these lines, and all kinds of things. It's a very cool technique. But as you can see, we've got all these sort of min zeros and different fields on columns. We have a table calculation, and this starts to get really, really complicated. And quite frankly, it's just not for the faint of heart, right? I tried making this work, and I struggled with it. And at that point, I'm just kind of like, all right, I think this is a little bit, excuse me. I think this is a little bit too complicated for me to try to make this work here. So I'm giving up on this single sheet option, even though I felt like we got kind of close, and I want to try something different. So what I'm going to do now is try doing map layers, right? So we used map layers and spatial files in the mapping section. Well, some clever people in the Tableau community realized that we could take sort of, X and Y coordinates, basically how you're plotting, all these charts on X and Y coordinates. We could turn those into geographic coordinates, right? So if we could sort of figure out the X and Y coordinates of each of these little points along our spark lines and where these reside, we could create these sort of spatial layers where we could create this chart, right? Very cool. And as you can see, I was able to do this chart by doing that, right? But it's very complicated. I've got 10 different map layers, and these aren't particularly easy here. So let's look at, if we look at the line chart, for the line chart, I basically had to figure out the X and Y coordinates of each of these points, and then draw a line, and then translate those into geographic coordinates using MakePoint. This is pretty tricky, right? And just trying to get everything to align and go on the right columns is very, very difficult. This took me hours to create, which, something that is a fairly simple chart, right? So once again, this is a little bit more complicated than I think than I would recommend for most people. Definitely not for the faint of heart. And at this point, having tried both those options for a single sheet, I really feel like it's time to punt and see if we can do this with multiple sheets, right? So we'll simplify this. We'll create a single sheet for just our sales. We'll show state, our total sales, and then our spark line. We'll do the same thing for profit. Now we're going to bring these together on a dashboard. So I don't want to show state and province multiple times. So we'll right click this and hide that header. And then we'll do the same thing for ratio. And then we bring them together on a dashboard like this, right? So this looks pretty much like what we wanted to be able to build, right? But the problem is that these lists are pretty long, and you see we get a scroll bar, and if we scroll one, it only scrolls that, and we don't get this sort of synchronized scrolling that we want to do. So what we want to be able to do is try to implement some sort of technique such that when I scroll one of these, it scrolls all of those. So fortunately, once again, our community is very inventive and has come up with a number of cool techniques for this. One of them is this paging technique here. So you can see we're showing 14 rows on the page by default. If I click the next button, it will move to the next 14. If I click previous, it goes back to the previous 14. So the way this is working, let's go to this sales page, is we've got a couple of parameters. We've got this page size parameter up here that indicates how many we show. This page parameter, as we increase that, it jumps to the next 14, right? Or whatever we've set that value to. And this is all in all the work. One other thing is this ID field. This is just an index field. It's using an index calculation to sort of number these. And then ultimately, filter, page filter, we're doing, sorry. Yeah, so we're doing this sort of complicated calculated field that says, based on these multiple parameters and these IDs, which of these do we keep? So basically, as we increase this page, it's figuring out which 14 do we keep and filter as we go. And in the end, it works really well, but it's kind of tricky, not nearly as complicated as the other techniques, but still a little bit of a hassle to implement. A similar version to this is this fake scroll bar technique. This creates this thing that looks like a scroll bar, but it's really just a sheet. You can see it's just a sheet here. And basically, one thing I forgot to mention on this is these buttons are basically firing parameter actions, right? So when I click next, it's firing a parameter action that updates this page, adds one to the page. When I click previous, it subtracts one from the page. And that's what's forcing all of this interactivity to happen. So in similar fashion, as I click on this scroll bar, it's firing parameter actions. And instead of moving full pages at a time, it's just moving up and down in sort of small portions of a page, depending on how far I've clicked down this scroll bar. So that's a pretty cool technique as well. And I really like these. I've used these before. I think they're great techniques. But I actually had a lot of trouble getting this to work. And the biggest issue I had is this index. So indexes are tricky, and any table calculations are tricky. So anytime you add them to your view, it makes things a little bit difficult. But I particularly had difficulty when there were missing values in a given month, right? So if Michigan, for example, didn't have sales for a given month, my index got all out of whack. So I ended up having to sort of pad my data to make sure I always had a value for each state and each month. And that is really tricky and just causes extra complexity. So at this point, it's like I've just spent, how many minutes, 10 minutes. And, in real life, I've spent hours banging my head off the wall, trying to come up with a really workable solution for this. And it just seems like this is way harder than it should be. And it sure seems like should be an easier way. And fortunately, as I was kind of working through some techniques like this, I think I found a cool and easy way to do this that works in most scenarios. So here's what we're going to do: is we're going to create our dashboard that just has our 3 sheets on it. Again, we've got scroll bars that work independently, and the trick here is we're going to just increase this height until those scroll bars disappear. If we get up to 27, so 2,700 pixels high, our scroll bars disappear. And now what we're going to do is add this. We're going to create a story, and we're going to add this to a story. We're going to right-click this caption box and edit the height. We'll change it to 1, so it basically just disappears. And boom, just like that, we have a synchronized scrollable dashboard that works and acts exactly like we wanted it to, just by using a story and a dashboard like this. All right, that's all for me. I'm going to hand it back over to Kev.
That was the hit of our presentation at the conference, by the way. So lots of people were talking about that one. So you win this round, Ken. All right, I'll finish this off here. I'm going to jump back into Tableau. Can everybody see cool random stuff, random tips? Ken? Can you see it?
We can.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Okay. I'm just going to do some random stuff, some things that I see people have struggled with, and some things I just think are generally cool. So this is a chart. It doesn't even matter what the chart is showing. And I've got this discrete filter showing month a year. As we can see, it's defaulted. It's sorting by January 2020, and it's ascending up to December 2023, even though we're not December 2023 yet. And one of the questions I get all the time is, how can we change the sort order of this filter? That's a really good question. Let's edit and look for the sort option, and there isn't one. And this is a really tricky thing. Like, I have no idea how to do that. So let's look at this field. We can change the sort order in this filter by changing the default sort order on the field itself. I'm going to close this, and let's just do that. I'm going to go to default properties and choose sort. And instead of ascending order, I'm just going to put it in descending order. Then if we show this filter again, we now have at the latest date and going backwards, so descending order. So nice little trick. I hear the same thing all the time with parameters. There's so many use cases I have where I have parameters, and I want it to be a dynamic parameter. I want the most recent date to pop in last. So when my users are picking, a month, there you can go to the most recent quickly instead of scrolling down 70 different items to find the most recent date. So the same thing works with a parameter. If I were to create a parameter off this field, I could go to create parameter, right? And now since my sort order is descending, it's going to put this in descending order just like we want it. But if I were to change that sort order, default properties sort, and change it to ascending, and then recreate that parameter, it's now going to be an ascending order. So if you want to change the sort order on your filters or in your parameters, you got to do it as the default sort order on that field itself. How many times have you had this sheet? And this big red sheet doesn't matter. I know it's big bolding in your face, but how many times you have this sheet and you want to move it around in your workbook? So you just start dragging, and then you drop it because you can't get any further. And then we click, and then we drag it again. And then we click. Well, there's a lot easier solution to this. Down here at the bottom right, you can see these three little icons that almost nobody ever touches. If we click this one, we get a PowerPoint type view, and we just drag this thing wherever we want. Boom, drop it. And then when we're ready, we just double click on the sheet we want to go to. So nice little way to move around your sheets. This is something that just drives me nuts as a perfectionist. This is a dashboard I created for my son's bowling team, and I've got this filter down here, and then I'm interacting with the filter, and I accidentally click, and I get this like gray band here. Let's see if I can back that off, if that'll go away. Yeah, it won't. So how do I get rid of that little gray band that keeps following me? So I'm clicking all over the place and starting to get a little frustrated and clicking, and I can't get rid of it. So one of the little things you can do to get rid of this, and it's a multi-select as well, is to just press and hold the control key on a PC and click again. That thing will disappear. So let me show that again. If you get that and you can't get rid of it, just click and hold that, and it's gone. I have this data source is about movies. I use it all the time. And I want to reuse it all the time. And it's an Excel spreadsheet, so I have to go find it in my folder structure. It just drives me nuts. So if there's a data source you use all the time, you can actually make it really simple on yourself. And you can right click on that data source, and you can just add it to save data sources. It'll ask you to save the file there. And then when I go to new data source, it'll just come down here in my saved data sources, right? So you can just get to it really quickly and easily. In Tableau, what I'd love in Tableau Desktop to be able to zoom in my dashboard to just make sure things are exactly like I want them. Like this area is really small up here. I'd like to zoom in and look at that and kind of tweak it, but there's no zoom capabilities in Tableau. Not like that, I guess. I mean, if I look at, say, a calculation and edit a calculation, I can hit my control key and my mouse wheel or your laptop pad, and I can zoom into a calculation. But there's nothing I can really do on the dashboard itself. And just for the fact that I'm saying that, you probably are figuring that, well, that's not exactly true. Tableau is starting to introduce the ability to zoom into certain menus. You start to see the actions menu. It looks a lot different than it used to. It looks like the web version now. If you bring this up, you can actually zoom in and out of that. Well, I'm not sure how valuable that is. Or if you go to the view data window, you can zoom in and out of that. But like this one right here, this window right here, it's got the scroll bar. It used to be 2 columns. I liked it better when it's 2 columns, but now it's 1 column and you have the scroll bar. You can actually zoom out of that or zoom in. You can show them all on one screen. So fingers crossed, Tableau will soon implement the ability to zoom into a desktop, into just like you would an image or in PowerPoint or something like that. I'll note on web edit, editing on the web, you can zoom in because you're just doing it on a browser. So nice little use case for web edit. I mentioned earlier that I have some dislike for stacked bar charts. Here's a stacked bar chart showing the sum of sales by category, but then it's colored by region, right? So we can tell really quickly which subcategory is selling well. We can see chairs as number 1. We can see phones number 2, followed by storage. That's great. But what if we were really interested in the regions? We have color on region on color for a reason. We're interested in the regions as well. So if we look at the West region, it's pretty easy to compare, right? Again, we can see chairs, phones, tables. But what if you wanted to compare the East region? That becomes much, much more difficult, right? Because these things aren't sharing a baseline. We can no longer really use length to figure out which one's larger. I mean, for example, which one is larger, this one or this one, right? Without using the tooltip, you can't really tell, or this one or this one. Without the tooltip, you can't really tell. So one of the things that I like to tell people to do is let's just bring region. I'll leave it on color and I'm going to just hit control. Let's bring region, not the rows, but the columns. That is not what I want either. There we go. Sorry. And now it's really easy to compare within a region. I can tell in the central region, it's chairs, followed by phones, then binders. In the East region, it's phones, followed by chairs, right? But you're probably saying to yourself, well, you've lost the grand total. We can't tell at a glance, like we could before, which one is the best selling of them all. Okay, so we can do that. Let's add a grand total. Let's go to totals and show row grand totals. Okay, we're getting there. This is now, we can tell within the regions which ones are the best selling, and we can tell the grand total. But our, stakeholders, they love stacked bar charts. And well, I sometimes think, why don't we just give it to them? Why don't we do the breakdown by region like we want, and then we give them the stacked bar chart and the grand total that they want? But how can we turn this grand total into a stacked bar chart? I mean, we've already got region on color, and it's just saying all the grand total is gray. I mean, we could do a separate sheet, but then we get into that whole problem that Ken was talking about with scrolling dashboards. And do we really want that? I'll show you another trick that we can do. We've got region on color, and we've also got region on columns. What I've done is I've duplicated like I did before, just right click and duplicate. I've duplicated the region pill. Now watch when I drop the region copy onto color, watch what happens to the grand total. I'm just going to drop it right on top of there. Watch the grand total. Boom, it turns into a stacked bar chart. So if you use a copy of the pill that you have on your view, it'll turn this into a stacked bar chart. You will have to sign the colors separately, by the way. One last thing, I'm going to try and go fairly quick about it. And this is just weird. I just think it's weird. This is a little dashboard I created about the Tableau visionaries. Like I mentioned before, 16 Hall of Famers. And this is kind of this little baseball card look, and it shows how many years people have been on. Just a fun little view. But it's not really great for doing any sort of analysis or understanding because it's so much information. So I just added this table. This is just in a container, and I've added a show hide button to show it and hide it. And it's just showing, for example, if I go down to Ken has it. Let me scroll up so you can see the headers. Ken has 5 years as a visionary. He is in the Hall of Fame, and he was active 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22, right? And then he went into the Hall of Fame. Me, I've been active for the last 4 years, right? So we've got this little table, and we just have this show hide button to close it. But what I've discovered is kind of weird is that you can actually make a copy of this button. Recently, Tableau introduced the ability to copy dashboard items. Can't copy a sheet, but you can copy, items, buttons, images, text. So let's copy this, and then I can just hit Control V to paste it, and it'll paste it up here. So now we have 2 of these buttons. If I click on this, both of them control this container, right? Okay, so that's kind of cool. How does this help us? Well, I've always thought it was a little bit weird when we open a container and then we use the same button to close it, because that's not how anything works in Windows. If I go open the dashboard actions menu, what do? I don't go back up to dashboard actions to close it. I hit the X button, right? Any of these menus that I open up, I hit the X button to close them, right? That's just how users users are used to. So maybe we can hack up a solution using these duplicate buttons to give them exactly that. So this is what I'm going to do. I talked about that transparent shape. I'm going to apply a couple different transparent shapes, and we'll see if we can make this happen. So I have this table button. When I click it, the table opens up. What I really want is this button to not do anything anymore. So let's make people think it doesn't do anything anymore. So when the item's shown, I'm going to just use a transparent button. Okay, so we click this, and it disappears. If I put this in we click that button, and the button disappears. People don't see, the button is still there, but people don't see it. Okay, so we got that. This is hacky, I know. And let's click this, and now that's gone. Now let's turn this into the X that we would use to close it. So when the thing is open, we want it to show an X, right? But when it's closed, when it's not show, when it's hidden, then we want it to show nothing. So I'm going to pick this transparent shape. Now let's see what happens. We have this X button. This opens it. This X closes it. So what we really want to do is just move this X, and I'm not going to do it here. I just basically would tile this into this container. And let me just show you the final. Oh, that's not it. I moved that thing there. Here's the final. I'm going to put it in full screen. We click this to open it. We click the X to close it. Open, close, just like every single other window we've ever used in Windows. Just a really friendly user experience, and just a matter of duplicating or copying and pasting the button that controls it. All right, I'm going to jump back into PowerPoint again. All this content is on demand at Salesforce Plus. You can log in and get that. And again, I'm assuming Brandy recorded it. And all the related blog posts are at flerlagetwins.com/coolstuff2023. But before we go, I just wanted to mention one thing. This is a paid advertisement. It's not paid. I just want to kind of talk very, very briefly about something called the Data Fam Career Path Makers. It's a new kind of user group, and it's really tailored about helping people in their data careers. Benefits of joining, as you see there on screen, is mentorship, lots of job search assistance. So if you're looking for a job in data, or if you're transitioning to a data career, it's really this sort of really supportive group that can kind of help you navigate some of these challenges. Lots of people have joined. I think this is the brainchild of Roy Aguilar, who is on the call right now, I believe. And I think they're up to like 100 people that have joined. It's just a really great thing to help you advance in your career and help others, through mentorship and assistance. If you're interested in joining, I encourage you to hit that first QR code. You can also join the Slack workspace with the second QR code. I'll leave that up on screen for just a second. Just a really great idea to help people move along in their data careers. All right, that's all we have. I don't know if people have any questions they want to ask verbally, or if they've covered it in the Q&A, but happy to take questions if we have time.
Thank you both so much for that presentation and for taking so many questions. I know there are 2 more, it looks like, and I know that you've kind of already answered some as we go. So, sorry, I'm reading through some of the questions. So I don't know if you want to answer those live or if you just want to reply to
Yeah,
them.
that's fine. The gray band, when you click on a filter and you get that weird gray band that you can't get rid of, if you're using a PC, all you have to do is hit the control key, hold the control key, and then click on that same gray band. It'll disappear. The other thing you can do is expand. We can float that filter and click outside of the filter space. That'll get rid of it, but the control thing works the best. I'm not really sure. Can you share the QA again? I'm not sure
What that
what
means.
that's referring to,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not missing anything there. Yeah, so
And
feel free to continue asking questions in the Q&A. We have about 15 minutes left of the meeting, so we can certainly spend maybe about, the QR code. We can spend about maybe 5 or so minutes taking more questions. So
I'd also just remind everyone that this is recorded, so we'll make that available so they can go back and look at some of the cool tips again.
definitely. Thanks, Patrick. So
And I shared that QR code again. Somebody asked, can you replicate the open close button functionality without copying the button, but instead creating another button, linking it to the same panel and edit this function? Maybe. I don't know. I tried linking buttons the other day separately and was very unsuccessful with it. So now you got me curious. So talk amongst yourself why I fiddle with this.
Ken, there is a question to revisit the story for handling the scrolling. Can you, I think this is recorded. So, Bruce, you can always go back and watch the recording. Here, it's also on Salesforce Plus, but Ken, I don't know if it's possible to at least walk through the mic drop part of that bit.
Yeah, sure. Let me just get it set up here.
Yeah. Thanks for the questions, everyone. They're really great.
In the meantime, I'll answer Scott's question. Yes, the answer is yes. You can create an edge, and you can do an edge hide show button on another container, and then link it over to that other the container you want to control. So then you'll have two buttons. So yes, I think Scott was probably getting at the fact that people aren't using newer versions, don't have the ability to copy and paste. Looks like you can still do it by Scott's method. So I'll have to write that up and give you credit, Scott.
Yeah. So back to synchronized scrolling. I mean, basically, the whole purpose of that section was sort of it was to share a bunch of different techniques that you can try, right? Because this technique doesn't work for every situation, quite frankly, right? But if and when this works, it's the simplest technique. And so ultimately, what we did is create 3 separate sheets: one for sales, one for profit, one for ratio, and we brought those together on this dashboard, right? And again, because these are too short to fit on the dashboard, we get a scroll bar for each one, right? So what we do is take the dashboard itself and increase the size until those scroll bars disappear. So now there are no scroll bars. We don't have sort of a main scroll bar, right? And we don't want our dashboard to be 2,700 pixels high necessarily. Usually you've got sort of you might have other pages on that dashboard or other sort of constraints where you don't want to have the dashboard itself be that high or that tall. So then we start with a blank. This is a blank story points. I never use stories except for this technique at this point. We drag that dashboard over to here, and because it's detected in this sort of story point space that this is too big to fit in the space, it creates that single scroll bar for us and allows us to scroll them all together. And then we just right click on this to edit height, change it to 1 so it disappears. And we have what looks kind of like a a fully functional dashboard, but it's actually using a story.
Love that. A couple other questions. Jennifer Smith said, where would you suggest getting more color palettes from? Ken, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah. Let me pull it up real quick here.
I got a link to it. I'll put it in there. You want to just talk about it? I'll throw this in the answer the question in the chat.
Yes. Let me share my screen. I've got it up here. So this was a question that a bunch of people were asking some time back. So we actually created a tool to for crowdsourcing this. We call it DataFam Colors. Has a bunch of things in it. I just added some contrast checking for accessibility purposes, but basically this workbook, everything people submit, there's 180 something palettes. Give it a minute to load. 181 palettes total. If you open this, you can scroll through them. You can see all the different colors. You can change to like a dark background to see how that works. But you can click this little button here and it'll download the preferences.tps file. And you'll have all of these 181 palettes in there. Anytime I use a new palette, I just add it to this tool and then download the TPS and replace it. So this is a great tool. And if you have palettes that you love, I would love for you to submit them to this. I think this option right here will take you to the Google form where you can submit those palettes. So this is my preferred method for it. And I'd love to see if people would add some things to it as well.
And then Jen said, I unfortunately missed much of the presentation due to another meeting, but generally I've gotten the impression that many visionaries and experts perhaps spend more time experimenting than others of us. Would you agree that some of your cool tricks were essentially happy accidents? Either way, what advice do you have for people to find these unexpected tricks? I think that there's lots of, sometimes, yes, they're happy accidents. Sometimes you're fiddling with something and you're like, hey, like, what about this? Right?
Yeah.
And like Ken, you found that filtering thing the other day, like, holy crap, that's been around for forever. And so I think some of them, yes, are happy accidents. Some of them I think come down to being straight stubborn. Like I can be stubborn. It's like Tableau should be able to do this. So I'm going to find a way to do it. I think that, and other times it's like, admittedly, I've just gone through the menus and try to find stuff that people don't talk about before, right? And try to find options and things. Pressed every key on the keyboard to see if they do anything, like if you hit a G, you get a grid, right? If you hit a T, you get something as well. There's different things that happen. So I think it's a combination of things, intentionally trying to find them, happy accidents, being stubborn when something doesn't do what you want it to do. And honestly, Ken and I spend so much time outside of our day jobs fiddling with Tableau just because we're excited about it. We write tons of blogs. When you write a blog, you really have to understand how Tableau works. And sometimes you run across those things as well. So I think a combination of things. Yes, we spend a crap load of time playing in Tableau, and that's probably why we run across a lot of them.
And I'll add two things. One is it helps to have a twin brother who does the same sort of stuff, because we'll call each other and be like, there's got to be a way to do this, right? I mean, that was how the synchronized scrolling thing came about. Kevin was like, I'm trying all these different things and they all stink. And I just thought, what if I throw this on a story? Can I make that work? And it worked, right? So that's how we made that discovery. Another thing I would say is the forums are just such a great wealth of knowledge. That Kevin was talking about, this filter thing that I just wrote a blog on that I never knew it existed. I've used Tableau for 7, 8 years, right? And I just found it by searching the forums. I'm like, oh, wow, that's a cool technique. So forums are a wealth of these little tricks when you run into tricky little problems like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for, answering so many of our questions, for sharing your presentation with us, for writing, and sharing all of your knowledge on your blog, and forums and Tableau Public. We really appreciate your time and efforts.
Thanks for having us.
Yes,
Of
thank you very
course, of
much.
course. So we have about 6 minutes left. So I'm going to run through the rest of our stuff somewhat quickly. And what I'm going to actually do is start with the giveaways. So we had lots of people asking questions right up until the very end. Thank you so much for all of that. Waiting for my screen to load. Cool. Oh no. Okay. So we have 4 winners. I'm going to say your name, and then if you could DM me your email address, I'll reach out to kind of, give you some more information about how you can pick your prize. So these are some prizes that you can pick. These are not the ones that you have to pick. So Brady Sullivan, you are one of the winners. Jen Shepard, you are also one of the winners. Robert Salas, you're one of the winners. And Aproop, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right, you also are a winner. So thank you, the 4 of you, for asking questions. Please DM me with your email address, and we'll take this conversation offline, and I'll make sure that you get a prize. Okay? Yay. Okay, so let me back up here and talk briefly now about some of the upcoming events here in Milwaukee. The Milwaukee Alteryx user group is having a meeting tomorrow. So you can show up. It's going to be in person. And then, we are in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We love our beer here. So there's going to be happy hour following. I just posted the link to that event in the chat. Then next week, we have the Madison Tableau user group, who, they always do such a phenomenal job. So if you want to head over to Madison, you can, register for their event. Next Friday, Dustin Shimmick and I are putting together something called the Data Careers Summit. So we've got some awesome speakers for that. That's happening next Friday. That one is virtual, so feel free to, join from anywhere that event. And then we have something called Analytics After Dark that is back here in Milwaukee. This is a little bit tool agnostic and just another reason to get together for beverages and chatting and nerding out about all things data. So join Katie Haley. She's here in the meeting. Join us all for Analytics After Dark in October. And then if you don't already know, there is a Tableau conference happening next year. We already know the date and we know where, and you can actually sign up for to save the date and get more information as it's announced. So all of those links are in the chat. Now, the Milwaukee TUG, we do have a 4th quarter meeting that we are putting together and planning. I think we're targeting November for that. And then we are also thinking ahead to next year and some things to just continue to engage the group. So stay tuned. And I think there's a few different ways that you can stay connected with us. We've got our event page, we've got LinkedIn, we even have an email, and we now have a YouTube channel, all our own, where we're going to post things like the recording from this event. So that's all of the housekeeping, and all of those links are also going in the chat. Sorry for all the links, but now you have all of the information. So again, congratulations to our winners, Brady, Jen, Robert, and Aproop. We really appreciate all your wonderful questions from everybody. And thank you so much to Ken and Kevin for sharing their knowledge and wisdom with us today, joining us and spending their time. So we really appreciate it. Patrick, is there anything that I forgot?
The only thing I would say, just that email address, mke tug at Gmail. That's Gmail, right?
Yep.
Please send us an email if there's anything that you want to see at future meetings. If you're interested in presenting at a future meeting, or we're still figuring out virtual and on-site, in-person meetings. But if a company would like to host a meeting in the future, please let us know. I think that's it.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. I can't believe we wrapped up on time. That was phenomenal. So thank you all so much for your time and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye.